When people talk about horror and the evil within, they usually talk about the monsters, the grotesque creatures, the body horror, the brutal difficulty, the disturbing imagery. And all of those things are certainly frightening. But for me, the scariest part of the evil within was never the monsters, it was the idea behind them. The realization that the entire nightmare exists inside the system called STEM, a shared virtual reality where human minds are connected together and reality itself can be manipulated. Because once you understand what STEM actually is, the horror changes completely. The game stops being a story about surviving monsters. It becomes a story about surviving the collapse of reality itself. I am Existential Thinker, and today we're exploring why the virtual reality concept in the evil within is so terrifying and why the game's deepest horror comes not from what lives inside the nightmare, but from the fact that the nightmare can rewrite reality whenever it wants.
Connolly, contact dispatch and let them know what's happening. Joseph, Kidman, you're with me. We're gonna have a look around.
Right.
Most horror stories depend on a stable world, even if that world contains monsters, ghosts, or supernatural forces. There are usually rules. A door stays where it is. A hallway remains the same hallway. A building has a fixed layout. Reality behaves consistently. The characters may be afraid, but they understand the basic structure of existence. The evil within takes that certainty away. Inside STEM, reality has no authority. Hallways twist and transform. Rooms appear from nowhere. Entire buildings shift without warning. The environment constantly changes shape. One moment you're standing in a hospital corridor, the next moment the walls dissolve, the floors disappear, and you're somewhere completely different. Nothing is permanent, nothing is reliable, and that creates a unique kind of fear. Most horror asks, what if something terrible is hiding in the dark? The evil within asks, what if the dark can change into anything it wants? The threat isn't simply the monster, the threat is the world itself. Because if reality can be rewritten at any moment, then survival becomes impossible to predict. You can't develop strategies. You can't trust your surroundings. You can't even trust the laws of existence. And that uncertainty creates constant psychological tension.
Are we awake?
Is everyone else all right? The city.
Whatever are you talking about? You are the only soul here. Right now.
One of the most disturbing ideas in The Evil Within is that STEM functions like a prison. But unlike a traditional prison, it has no visible walls. Normally, confinement is easy to understand. You're locked in a room, trapped in a building, held behind bars. The boundaries are obvious. STEM is different. Its victims can walk through streets, buildings, entire landscapes. They can travel great distances. Yet, they remain completely trapped because none of it is real. The concept taps into one of humanity's oldest fears, the fear that our perception might be wrong, the fear that reality might be an illusion. Throughout history, philosophers have asked questions like, how do we know the world around us is real? How do we know our senses can be trusted? The evil within transforms those questions into horror, because inside STEM, perception is literally manipulated. The environment lies, the system lies, Even your own senses lie. And if you cannot trust your senses, how do you know what is real? That uncertainty becomes a prison more effective than any physical cage. Because escape requires understanding your situation, and STEM constantly prevents that understanding.
Just ahead is the hospice my brother runs. He'll take us in.
That didn't answer my question.
I honestly don't know. For all I know, I'm losing my mind and you're just a delusion. But I'd like to think I still have a shred of dignity and an obligation to protect my patient.
Another reason STEM feels so disturbing is that the nightmare world isn't random. It's shaped by human consciousness. Much of the game's reality is influenced by Ruvik, and that means the player isn't simply exploring dangerous locations. They're exploring a damaged mind. This changes how we interpret everything. The environments stop being places, they become psychological wounds. A distorted hallway is no longer just a hallway, it's a manifestation of trauma. A grotesque creature is not simply a monster, it's an expression of suffering. The nightmare world becomes a physical representation of emotional pain, and that's deeply unsettling. Because it means the player is trapped inside someone else's trauma. The rules of reality are being dictated by a person consumed by grief, anger, obsession, and psychological damage. Imagine being forced to live inside another person's worst memories. Imagine every fear they ever experienced becoming part of your environment. That is essentially what STEM creates. And because trauma does not follow logical rules, neither does the world. The result is a nightmare that feels personal rather than supernatural.
Are you alright?
My head wouldn't stop buzzing. It felt like it was about to crack open. But now it's like I'm starting to get used to it.
Perhaps the most frightening aspect of STEM is what it does to identity. Most horror stories threaten the body. STEM threatens the self. Inside the system, minds are connected together. Memories overlap. Thoughts influence reality. Individual consciousness becomes vulnerable. And that raises terrifying questions. What happens when your memories can be altered? What happens when your perceptions can be manipulated? What happens when your thoughts are no longer entirely your own? Throughout the game, the line between Sebastian's personal experiences and the artificial world becomes increasingly blurred. The player starts questioning everything. Did that really happen? Was that memory genuine? Is that experience real, or is it being manufactured? These questions are frightening because identity depends on memory. Our sense of self is built from our experiences. But if those experiences can be edited or rewritten, then who are we? The game never provides comforting answers. Instead, it constantly undermines certainty. And that's what makes the concept so effective. The horror isn't dying. The horror is losing confidence in your own existence.
Who do you think you are? I know who you are. Seb. I know what you crave. What you fear. Will you be able to live with yourself knowing what I'm gonna make you do? Poor little Joseph couldn't. Too bad they dragged you into this. But either way, you're mine. To do with as I please.
What's fascinating about STEM is that it functions almost like a technological version of Lovecraftian horror. In traditional cosmic horror, humanity encounters forces beyond comprehension: ancient beings, impossible dimensions, truths so vast that the human mind cannot process them. The result is madness. In The Evil Within, technology fills that role. The STEM system allows people to merge minds, manipulate consciousness, reshape reality itself. Human beings have gained access to power they don't fully understand. And instead of creating a better future, it creates catastrophe. This is what makes STEM so frightening. The system isn't evil because it's supernatural. It's evil because it represents human ambition without limits. People wanted to control consciousness. They wanted to master reality. And in doing so, they created something beyond their ability to manage. The game suggests that some boundaries exist for a reason. Some aspects of human experience should not be controlled. Some doors should remain closed. STEM ignores those boundaries, and the result is horror.
Leslie has been here before and made it back. He survived being linked to Ruvik, the only patient ever as far as I know.
Wonderful. What does that have to do with any of this?
He's our way out, Detective. Our only way back.
Years after playing The Evil Within, many players remember specific monsters: the Keeper, Laura, the various grotesque creatures that inhabit the nightmare. But beneath those memories is something even more unsettling: the realization that none of those monsters are the true horror. The true horror is the system itself, because STEM attacks the foundations of reality. It attacks memory, identity, perception, consciousness. It asks questions that don't have comforting answers. What if your memory could be rewritten? What if your senses could never be trusted? What if reality only existed because the system allowed it to? What if another person's suffering became your world? Those questions linger long after the monsters disappear, because they target something fundamental: the need to trust our own experiences, the need to believe reality is stable, the need to know who we are. And STEM threatens all of those things simultaneously.
Detective, are you all right? Is there anyone else?
Just give me some real fresh air.
The horror of The Evil Within isn't ultimately about monsters. It's about vulnerability. Not physical vulnerability, but existential vulnerability. Inside STEM, reality becomes negotiable. Memory becomes uncertain. Identity becomes fragile. The world can change at any moment because someone else's mind decides it should. And once that possibility exists, nothing feels safe anymore. Not the environment, not your memories, not even your own thoughts. That is why the virtual reality concept in The Evil Within remains so frightening. Because the game understands something profound about horror. A monster can threaten your life, but the collapsing reality threatens your understanding of existence itself. And when you can no longer trust reality, there's nowhere else to hide. There are certain games and TV shows that feel so connected that it lingers in your memory for a long time. That feeling of nostalgia when I played Persona 4 after watching Twin Peaks. I am Existential Thinker. Thanks for watching.